Zerba Modelo. Please drink responsibly. And it was a week full of giving thanks. Unless you're an Ole Miss fan, then you said thanks for nothing, Lane. But on the bright side, the penultimate college football playoff rankings will be announced tonight. And Adam, these are super important in terms of championship weekend and maybe the messiest college football playoff we've seen.
Without question, this is maybe the most excited I've been to do one of these shows, because we're going to start to really get the true puzzle pieces. And not only that, but we've got to evaluate interim coaches all over the place, not just at Ole Miss, where coordinators are staying to help resumes. Like, this is uncharted waters, Paige. So for me, though, we're going to learn a lot, because we know conference championships matter, but we also know a lot of teams that are hoping their names are going to be called are done playing football, right? So for a lot of teams, especially the bubble, where I'm interested if we get some movement tonight, they're going to be watching closely because their pencils are down. There's no more work to be done.
Yes. Now, let's start with the biggest storyline of the weekend. Obviously, Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss to go to LSU. And we know that he is not going to be coaching the Ole Miss team for the rest of this season, which is unfortunate because we do expect them to be in the college football playoff. Kramer, do you think the committee makes any sort of move or adjustment for this Ole Miss team in factoring in that Lane Kiffin will not be coaching for the rest of the year?
Maybe a small move, but I saw a lot of comparisons to Florida State when they lost Jordan Travis and ultimately missed out to the last spot to Alabama. Different format, different year, different scenario. We saw Florida State without its quarterback. We saw what it looked like. We don't know what Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin looks like, but they're keeping both coordinators, obviously naming their defensive coordinator, the active head coach. There was some politicking, I think, from Ole Miss side just to make sure they maintain this dream season. How does the committee factor that in? I got to be honest, Paige. I said it to you before we went on. I'll say it again. I don't have a lot of faith in this committee. I don't. And frankly, there are no real guidelines to say, well, both coordinators are in place, we're going to factor it with X. This is a really weird year. To me, though, Ole Miss is still a lock. Wherever they move around into this, you have to let this team in. If you're not, and you think Lane is that important, then you need to start over. Then this playoff does not work for anybody.
Let's talk about a conference that is going to pretty much provide all of the chaos you could possibly imagine for this final rankings on Sunday, which is the ACC.
Of course.
Their championship game is going to be the domino effect of a lot of things. Kramer, do you think that the ACC may, in fact, be left out? How are you feeling if you're Miami? What is the situation in terms of ACC feelings right now?
If you're Miami, and we've heard from Mario Cristobal all week, you're feisty, you're mad, and you're hoping for some reason that your win over Pitt jumped you over Notre Dame. And we could talk about head-to-head and criteria and all it means. But the game at hand is Virginia and Duke. And we have a 5-loss team in Duke that could win the conference, which seems appropriate and somewhat disgusting. But we know also, Paige, how this committee and all the committees over the years feel about group of 5 teams. They don't much care for them unless you have no losses or 1 loss or maybe 2, right? And so is Duke going to get in over a James Madison? Are you going to really do that with a 5-loss? And that point spread is close. Virginia's a small favorite. It becomes very clean and easy if Virginia wins, I think. Less so if Duke wins, and Duke just beat this team, by the way, a couple of weeks ago. So the ACC, fittingly, is an absolute mess, and I think Miami is kind of left holding its breath.
Yeah, and I do want to mention to everyone, because this is something, all right, look at James Madison in there. So this is perfect for this. North Texas, okay, so we've got, by the way, the top 5 conference champions get automatic bids into the college football playoff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the Power Four. Like, we've had it be the Power Four every year. But to your point, if Duke wins, those 2 teams are probably set up to potentially get in over a Duke team. And probably should, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm going to be frank there. I know it would stink, but in terms of then I would be questioning why we set it up this way in the automatic bid situation.
I think the committee is really telling you right now that is not happening. This is about as much love for these teams as we've seen. And frankly, they're kind of setting the table that we could get 2 group of 5 teams into the playoff. That huge observations. We're going to get a ton more. And there you go. And Tulane shows up. So Tulane and North Texas is really kind of winning you're in. Arizona, by the way, go Cats, Paige.
Go Cats.
There you go.
My Arizona Wildcats.
So now we get into Virginia, of course, and I think it's pretty clear for them. You got to win to be in. It's been that wave now for, well, essentially since the season started for Virginia, but for a long time. And kudos to them, by the way. I know the ACC has been a mess. this is a weird scenario. They've played extraordinarily well. They had a coach that was sort of on the hot seat they've managed to win close games. You look at the overall record, it's been a tremendous year.
Utah at 15.
Yeah,
Solid year for them.
solid year,
Tough.
but
Yeah.
down the stretch leaking oil, right? Like because they were
Yes.
squarely on the bubble, and there you go. Now we get into our bubble.
Ooh.
Vanderbilt, are they gonna is Diego gonna win a Heisman? That's an interesting spot for them. So this next couple of places I think are going to be really, really interesting. But Vandy, of course, what a year for them as well. Doing this, maybe getting 5-star quarterback recruits today. I mean, unbelievable momentum for this program.
I do want to know what the chat has to say about our conversation with the group of 5 teams getting in over maybe a Duke team. Of course, we'll give Virginia the credit and assume that that is the team that's going to win. Of course, a close game maybe, but curious if the chat would rather see a Duke team in than some of those teams in terms of college football playoff games.
So there's
All right,
Texas. Yeah, so
there is
Texas,
Texas.
a win over A&M gives them a boost, but it feels maybe expectedly not enough. Right? As much as Steve Sarkisian has campaigned, I don't blame him for doing that, by the way. All
Yeah.
these coaches need to be campaigning for their schools. Not the perfect position. And we could talk about Texas's year because there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and I think you and I had this conversation about just the college football playoff in general, which I do want to mention. Okay, we have
Boy.
Miami there
Oh
at
boy.
12. Again,
Yeah.
again, okay, behind Notre Dame.
And that's huge, right?
Yeah.
That is huge. So for those two teams, Miami fans in the chat are going to have something to say about this. And you know what? The more I looked at it, Paige, the more I can kind of agree. This argument that has played out all the last week, I think is lost. It's not necessarily the head to head. It's when you lose. When you lose is such a deciding factor in these
It
rankings.
has been.
It's
History shows us that.
it's
But
huge, and it's factoring here right now.
and I will say Notre Dame is the benefactor of that quite often.
Absolutely.
Something I do want to mention really quickly about these two teams in Miami and Texas, to the point that I was about to make. This is going to change a lot of things in terms of college football. Because those two teams played very tough opponents early in the season, and one is not getting the credit for that win, and the other is, in this position because they have one extra loss because of it in Texas. And so our non-conference big games that we get at the start of the season might go away, to Sark's point, because why would you schedule them if this is going to be the case? And so these rankings certainly have implications far beyond just this year's college football playoff, because again, there is going to be a decision at the middle of January after the national championship of what the college football playoff looks like next year. And I think this is why they're waiting. It was supposed to be yesterday.
Yes.
It is now at the end of the season, because they wanted to see sort of how this shakes out. And wow, okay, so BYU and Notre Dame. Interesting there, because again, that basically says
No, Notre Dame is in. I mean,
yeah, Notre Dame is in,
Notre Dame is in,
and BYU needs to win to get in. Well, I guess maybe they could knock them out.
well, yes. I mean, BYU is in a unique situation, a true win and you're in, and we'll see how they play. Alabama at 9, survived a scare. Always weird when you play at Auburn, so this was no exception. And I'm interested to talk about Bama because we have a unique situation coming up for some teams that are playing an extra game. And if Alabama loses to Georgia, how penalized will they be? That is the question. And
Well,
we'll find out here soon.
and we know that this version of the college football playoff sort of hasn't forced Notre Dame to play in a conference. I know there's been a lot of conversation like, oh, join a conference, and really they're not going to until they're forced.
We
I
went
don't
backwards, by the way, this year when we remade seeding. It gave less incentive for Notre Dame to join a conference when it's just top 4 seeds, right?
exactly, but
Yeah.
this could have been the case where, okay, you're not in a conference championship. Seeing if Alabama loses and they fall out of this because of that, and they're penalized for
Yes.
playing in a conference championship when Notre Dame sat at home. I mean, you'd have an argument to be really upset about that, because it seems a little unfair that they just get to sit back and say, okay, cool.
So Oklahoma, by the way, avoids almost a horrible loss, but because they have the head-to-head over Alabama, they're kind of stuck. So we're kind of accommodating head-to-head there, even though Oklahoma's offense has not looked great for a while. Texas A&M Decent sized drop in the loss, but still squarely in the mix, obviously, to host a playoff game because outside the top four, the next four are going to host a game. And then there's Ole Miss. Um, no Lane Kiffin. I think things are fine.
Everything is fine.
Everything is fine, at least
I
for now.
agree. The chat definitely saying that BYU should be over Notre Dame and arguing that Miami should be over Notre Dame. So the thought of Notre Dame being in this position is staying true in the chat that they are overrated, which is a sentiment that has been for years as we've been doing these shows. But I would agree that I think BYU deserves to be over Notre Dame. I know you might disagree. I think BYU should be over them.
I don't. I feel like I've been campaigning for BYU all year. By the way, BYU, shout out to you keeping your coach. It sounds like Penn State had like a head start and can't hire anybody. That's a little weird. And there's the rest of your rankings, which goes into relative chalk. So yeah.
Can we talk one moment quickly about the fact that if BYU does in fact lose this weekend and get left out of the college football playoff, I will say to Kaylani, hey, in the Big Ten, you actually don't get left out for losing your Big Ten championship game. So just saying, I know it was a great choice, and I'm sure BYU fans are very happy, but I will say that is going to be an interesting thing that does happen, and also a cookie company saving a college football program.
Your sport could never.
So this sport, yeah, your favorite sport could never. This is great. So we are going to get the bracket breakdown here, but of course, 1 and 2, Ohio State, Indiana. The question is going to be, this weekend, obviously, one of those teams is going to lose. And what happens to those teams? I have a very strong opinion about that we will get to.
Me too.
Georgia at 3, Texas Tech at 4. Love to see it. You'll love to see it.
Yeah, Texas Tech signing their coach to an extension this week. I mean, they got a ton of momentum. Yeah. They're a legit threat, obviously, moving forward.
Can we talk quickly about, do you think A&M should have fallen this far? Do you think they should have been behind Ole Miss?
I think there's an argument to be made with Ole Miss. It's very interesting because of the lane thing. But A&M has had some close calls along the way, right? And when you look at, obviously, the win over Notre Dame, the rest of the strength of schedule, I'd say, is a little bit of a mixed bag. But you could say that about most of the teams there. If you want to be critical of Ohio State or Indiana, yeah, I get it as well, or at least pieces of that resume. So I'm a little surprised at 7. I think it's a good point. You could have made a case for 6. I'm not sure it will ultimately matter for them as long as they stayed in that top 8.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I would have left them maybe at 6 and put Ole Miss at 7 there. But also, let's talk about Oklahoma because ugly football game.
Yeah.
Still winning. Still have, doesn't matter how they win. It's that they win and who they've beaten. Do you think this Oklahoma team, if we were just looking at eye test, would you have this Oklahoma team in the college football playoff?
I've been thinking, I was talking about this with a friend of mine too. For what they've done, it's hard to deny them. But when you watch them right now, and offensively, like John Mateer, whether it's injury or whatever, it just is not, it's so different from what we saw in September and October when we saw them against Michigan. And we said, my goodness, there's your Heisman. And so defensively, they'll probably stay in every game. But that was bad. That was bad. Yeah, if you're going just on eye test alone and you've watched the last few weeks. But then again, I mean, the Alabama win wasn't that long ago. And there you go, a potential rematch as well. So I think optically, the optics are not great for them. And by the way, how painful was that game for the bubble? Like you've got teams waiting to fall into that spot, and they just were able to pull it out.
Denied. Yeah, I think 11 will get Virginia. That would be the conference champion for ACC if we assume that they win that game. I think 11 would be Virginia, and I think 12 we would get North Texas if I had to if I was a betting woman, which you know what I am.
Yes,
so that's going to be my bet for the final fill of this bracket. But I do want to talk about conference championship week because, buddy, have we been hearing since this playoff expanded that this weekend doesn't matter, these games don't matter, and I feel like they do. But let's maybe start with the ones that have the most impact. And of course, we talked about the ACC championship game.
Yes.
We both think that Virginia is going to win this game, correct?
No,
you got Duke?
I have Duke. I have Duke.
Kramer,
Yeah,
Kramer,
now I've
you want chaos. You want chaos. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
What?
The reason I am surprised by this, I need the people in this live stream to know this, is because you are also a betting man.
Oh,
and
yes.
you have bet Duke quite a bit this season, and they are turnover happy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the Duke Illinois game is one of the more painful football games experiences I've ever been a part of. And by the way, not just when I bet on Duke, when I bet against Duke, they seem to lead me astray. So congrats to Virginia. This point spread's only 3.5 points. I think you're right. It's the source, the main source of chaos, not the only source, because oh my goodness, two group of five teams. And if you're a Miami fan, that has got to be painful to hear, right? I mean, it is. I'm sorry, I don't mean to rub it in, but that I think unlocks based off of this bracket, us getting two group of five teams in. Who, by the way, we got some coach replacements going on there too, right? Coaches that are staying on to coach their teams, and obviously riding out these dream seasons.
Okay, so because you think I think Virginia's going to win, so I think Virginia is going to be slotted in there at 11, and then I think the winner of the American will be in the 12 spot. That is my prediction. Because you were saying that Duke wins, do you think that they get into the college football playoff, or who? So who would be the two teams that you think?
James Madison and North Texas are going to be my two teams.
Sorry, Tulane, without your
but again,
with your head coach.
The committee is taking a stand here. And I like that they're doing that. I can be critical of what they've done in some places. You're putting James Madison in by saying, yes, we're acknowledging now finally that this team is good, and we're going to reward them even if they win a game that they're favored by like 23.5 points in.
By the way, Tulane's head coach and James Madison's head coaches are both leaving to go to other places. And if their team makes the college football playoff, will be coaching their college football games, their college football playoff games.
Different scenario than Lane, by the way. And they are.
I don't understand Ole Miss not letting Lane do it. I think the whole poaching players things, you think he's going to do that? He's not going to do that from afar. Why wouldn't you just let him win you some games?
You know what Lane could have done if he wanted to coach? He could have stayed.
That's true. That's true.
And he.
But I think for the players, if you're Ole Miss and you're that athletic director, you're going, you know what? I want to give these players the best opportunity and our program the best opportunity, and that is with Lane. I understand he could have stayed and said, "Hey, wait for me." But seeing that two other schools.
No, it's in your conference. It's different.
He's gonna poach those players. He already has.
And that doesn't exactly make me want to do all warm and fuzzies with Lane. Now, look, I'll say this. They've got an elite play caller that Lane has been with for a really long time.
Yes.
And Golding, an elite defensive coordinator, who I think is a good hire. Raw maybe as a head coach, but a guy that's worked under Nick Saban. Like, all hope is not lost. Like, they can scheme, and if they play enough defense, they can win. And so really, Lane or no Lane, this team is tough out. Like that I'll say. I want to, Ole Miss, as long as this whole saga has not impacted them, I still think is a threat. And I don't know, are going to take them serious enough, right? That'll be interesting.
No, true. Very true. And the teams they play against might not either because of that. Let's talk about the SEC title game. So if Alabama loses this game, do they fall out automatically, or is there other implications that need to happen before Alabama is completely out?
Now, Alabama has been on the other side of teams losing conference championship weekend and them sitting on the sideline and them being in. I
love it.
They do. I don't think they will be out though. I really don't. Do you? Like, the committee, this is a moment of truth here for the committee, is playing an extra game. How are we going to treat that? Does it matter how they look if they lose 30-10? Does that matter?
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it does. I think it's a tough argument to say, you played an extra game, congratulations, and you lost, you're out. People may not like that. I kind of understand it. But I think that, especially given their strength of schedule, I think the committee has shown Alabama some respect along the way.
Well, and to your point is that one of their most glaring loss, it's like not a good loss, whereas Oklahoma, okay, you can make the case it's a good loss, even though I hate using that. Week 1. So the committee is like forgotten. That's like not even on their radar. They've
beaten this team already, which is really weird, right? So I don't do the whole it's hard to beat a team, but whatever. They may play them again.
It's hard to beat a team twice.
Yeah, maybe 3. Well, whatever. I get it. You got to play the game, and somebody's got to win. But okay. I think I'm an Alabama fan. I feel good.
If Alabama was behind Notre Dame, I would have been a little more worried, but I
Agreed.
think there should be a case, and I will make the case for it, that BYU should be in no matter what happens. That's not going to happen thanks to Notre Dame. But if, say, Texas Tech loses and BYU wins, they I would think that they should jump Alabama or Notre Dame to be in, but I don't know that that's going to be the case. If Alabama was ranked one more lower, I think they would technically still be on the bubble, but I kind of don't know that I think that they're that big of a bubble team anymore.
It matters what is the logo on the side of the helmet, and I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
I'm
it's
not
true.
arguing for
I
this.
mean, the chat has been saying it's rigged for the SEC, which in again,
I love
we're
it.
seeing
It's
we're
the
seeing
season.
that.
Yeah,
Tis the season because the bubble teams are all SEC teams.
and I would love to see BYU make that a game. It's double-digit point spread. If you watch
Yeah.
the first game, BYU was pretty competitive for a while. Texas Tech looks brutal, like really tough right now. I know the strength of schedule hasn't been exceptional, but you and I have said this pretty much every show we've done. They're just built differently in that conference. Even a team like BYU, which stood up for a while, couldn't stay up forever. And I'm worried the
Yeah.
same thing's going to happen here.
So who do you think is going to win the SEC title game?
I like Bama. I
See,
do. Was that Georgia game all concerning? It was funny. We thought it was going to be Georgia Tech points galore, no defense. It just they looked disinterested, for lack of a better term, and maybe that
yeah.
was it. Even against a quote unquote rival. A little worrisome after Georgia had played so well. I like Bama in this game, and it's not always pretty with Bama. On the offense, we've been pretty critical of it, but I think they're going to have a chance to win. Spread is 2.5 points, so really, really close.
I have Georgia. So just we're on the other side of those, the ACC and the SEC. Big 12
Good
title
start.
game, though. I do think that Texas Tech is going to win. I don't think BYU will have the opportunity to get in losing, though, based off of this, which I
But
thought maybe would be the case before we saw these rankings.
but that really is the game. Like, okay, Duke in the ACC, we've got our scenarios. If Virginia wins, it's very clean and easy. If not, I think, we think maybe two group of five teams, but we know what will happen. But BYU kind of changes everything if they're able to pull off, would be a huge upset. And Paige, conference championship weekends have been kind of chalky overall in the playoff
Yeah.
era. I'd love to see a weird weekend where we get some really unexpected things happen, albeit in games. We have a lot of games where we kind of can connect the dots. That one's different. BYU wins that, and all of a sudden, rankings get a huge, huge shift.
Let's not forget about the number one and number two team in the country. Let's
Oh,
talk Big Ten championship. Now, I am going to make a prediction that Indiana wins this game.
oh man.
And I love it for the chaos of it all. I will explain that a little bit later. However, this game still does matter in terms of seeding because I would think, and the committee, if they don't do this, I would be so annoyed. I think it's just like if Indiana wins, they just swap. I think,
Yep.
yes, I don't think they should fall between outside of 1 and 2. Like that would be insanity that any other team would jump those two.
I agree with you. I have Ohio State winning this game. I wouldn't move Indiana off this spot. And if you want to move them a spot, I guess if Georgia wins a conference championship, because that is the one factor here, Paige. We say it matters. We say we want to get the best teams, but then the most deserving teams. And the most deserving teams in the eyes of the committee win championships. So would it shock me if Georgia, if they beat Alabama, move up a spot, Indiana goes to 3? No. If conference championships matter, maybe that's the path we take. It feels like they matter less than when that discussion started, if I'm being perfectly honest in this format. I'm not saying they don't matter, but it feels like they matter a little bit less than they used to.
I will say this, over the summer, there was a lot of talk of this weekend potentially being like play-in games. So conferences not having just one game, but two games to determine winners of maybe automatic bids to get in, which I'm not opposed to. I am not opposed to, but I'd be curious what the chat thinks about how we could make this maybe more exciting for some of the other championship weekends. But I do think there's still a lot to happen, more so than we've seen. I mean, more so than I feel like we saw last year. Of course, we did see like a bid stealing situation, but I don't know. I feel like this one's a little bit messier, especially with how bad the ACC is.
I will say, Ohio State, Indiana, while we know both of these teams are getting buys, you're probably going to decide a Heisman if it's not going to Diego, which you could argue it should. You're going to decide a Heisman. You're going to have a number one seed. You have arguably the game of the year. And both coaches are clearly motivated. They look mad pretty much all the time, which I love.
Yeah.
So that's a monster football game. So while it's not going to knock anybody out, I can't wait, right? It still is a massive, massive football moment.
Yes. Now, Kramer, it is time for fan favorite presented by Modelo, where we each will choose a top contender and a sleeper pick for the national championship. And this is my moment to say my top contender is Indiana, because if not Ohio State, then Indiana. In terms of these two teams, you could look at them and say they are so similar. They're the best two teams in the country. They're the most complete teams in the country. The only difference between the two is that one won a national championship last year, which is fair. That's why they're the better team. But I think we should be considering the fact that Indiana is probably the best bet to stop Ohio State from winning a national championship, and we're going to get a preview of that. So you should take them seriously. Next up, my sleeper. This has been my sleeper from the very beginning, since the beginning of the season, since before it started, and that is Texas Tech. Please forget everything you know about the Big 12, okay? Just wipe your memory, all right? Don't look at the logo on the helmet. Don't worry about the cash that you've heard is being spent. By the way, that's being spent like every other school is spending.
Spent well.
This Texas Tech team has really worked through injury. They haven't been at their best for a decent portion of their season and still found a way to beat teams by an enormous amount of points. And I really do think they're going to compete in the playoff and be able to challenge a lot of teams, especially on the defensive side. So those are my contender and sleeper for the national championship. Kramer, give me your fan favorite.
I got to tell you, I love Texas Tech. I love the way the team is built. I love that pick. But my contender, you probably know this if you just heard us debating, is Ohio State. Look, this defense, all the pieces that they lost, right? A dozen plus players in the draft. You put in Julian Sayin, you lose your coordinators, and they're arguably better. Sayin might win a Heisman. Someone wrote that earlier this year, Paige, just saying. I just love the way this team is constructed. And we haven't even talked about Jeremiah Smith yet and Cardell Tate, right? There's just so much talent. They're overflowing with talent. And if in Michigan, maybe a little bit of a slow start, and then they were able to play some bully ball, which I like to see, because that was in that exact game, the knock on that team. They could win ugly. And that game in the snow was a little bit ugly. I think Ohio State's going to be a tough out this week, any week moving forward. What a difference a year makes, by the way, when we're talking about the Buckeyes and the vibes heading into this week. My sleeper is Alabama. Now, it's the pieces just have not exactly come together perfectly here for a little while. But when you look at those pieces in Ty Simpson and those wide receivers, I'm still convinced, Paige, that the offense can turn it up, and the defense probably isn't getting enough credit for some of the games they have. I knew that the Auburn game was going to be ugly and close. This Georgia game is going to be tough. The one thing I'll say about Alabama is they're battle tested. It's been this way for about 2 months, right? Where they can play games that they lose. I think that's going to work to their advantage. And I could say they're a sleeper now because I think they're in the playoff. Even if that's up for debate, I think they're going to be in. And regardless of who they play, and they might be hosting a game, who knows? Or maybe even work their way up to a bye. Again, a lot here in the air. I think they can win it all.
Well, Kramer, because they seem to be off the bubble, we will leave Alabama at that. But in terms of bubble teams that could potentially make it, Texas is one the chat wants to talk about, okay? Because there's a lot of SEC's overrated, but there's a lot of look at what Texas has done this year. Your thoughts on whether or not Texas has a case, even though they are sitting at home, and what would need to happen for maybe them to be able to make it?
I don't see a path, do you?
No.
And I'm not saying they don't have an argument. I do not see a path.
Yes.
Steve Sarkisian is campaigning for his team, but he's speaking a lot of truth. And to the point about should we have played Ohio State, the answer is no.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have. They should have played, somebody else where they were a 40-point favorite and they win convincingly. And that's bad. So, but that being said, they almost lost to Kentucky, who just fired their football coach. They almost lost to Mississippi State. Right? They're better now. And that should matter. Arch is playing so much better. That win was fantastic. I'll say they lost to Florida, right? Like, so while we can say, oh, Texas, they shouldn't play Ohio State, there's some pretty bad moments here too that we have to at least account for in this. And that's going to be Texas undoing. The Ohio State loss isn't why Texas isn't making the playoff. That Florida loss there, that was bad, right? And look at that stretch of games. That was bad too.
By the way, for those upset, that's why Miami is ranked ahead of them. So just keep that in mind. the committee does have some things they are consistent with, and that might be one of them.
I
But
I
yeah,
don't.
no,
It's
I get
concerning
it.
trend though. It is. We live for these games in week one, and if I'm Sark, I'm saying the same thing, and I don't like that because I do think it could have an impact on scheduling in the future.
Yeah, and I mean anyone behind Texas, Vandy, Utah certainly doesn't have a case. I think the chaos really starts with the ACC and who wins it, and if the group of five teams are going to get in. I think BYU being behind Notre Dame is very telling. I disagree with it. I'm just going to say that I very much disagree with it.
I
Um,
What if BYU plays well and loses? I mean, you can't jump Notre Dame, but like
you
what
should because you played in a conference championship game. That was the
I'm
whole
kind of with
point.
you, and this is the
That was the
part
whole point.
that I want to see the committee in a bind. And I don't necessarily think, to your question about bubbles, there are a ton of binds here. If BYU wins, that's really interesting. But then you just kind of slide teams down, right? And maybe Notre Dame is out. I
Where
mean
do you
that
put yeah, where do you put BYU though?
you probably, if they beat Texas Tech, I mean, probably at 8 in front of Oklahoma, or you know what I mean, somewhere like there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this sounds crazy, but you might put them over every team that didn't play this weekend.
Well, that too as
You know
well.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you
would you
shouldn't be
bump them
punished
over?
for
Would you
that.
bump them over A&M?
And by the way, I just want to say the chat is very much been talking about the committee and all of this stuff. I'm just saying, like, if you really want the committee to follow the rules of what this is and put in the teams that are supposed to get in, then and there's a lot of Notre Dame like hatred and bias, and I think in this situation, like it just seems a bit unfair.
Could you
To
imagine if BYU's was Michigan and Michigan had that resume? Just could you imagine? Where would
Could
they
you
be?
imagine?
6, right? Like 7? Like let's keep it real. Like that is part of it. BYU, which is by the way, has had 2 phenomenal football seasons in a row. It feels like
Yeah,
Groundhog Day is
them getting
barring,
left out. Yeah.
yeah, barring something unforeseen. And by the way, go do it, BYU. That'll solve this problem real easy if you go win this football game.
No one was saying that, by the way, that BYU's schedule was grueling, but I also would like to
Agreed.
say that you should not get credit for good losses at the beginning of the season or even bad losses. Notre Dame is held to a different standard. So that's what I'm arguing here for those in the chat who are thinking that Notre Dame would just absolutely demolish BYU in a head-to-head matchup.
And Miami is the other one that we really haven't talked about. It's again with the ACC scenario, what it is. It's like they're in football purgatory here, right? And I'm trying to find a way to make this work, Paige, and I just can't do it for Miami. Even though I would say if you were to ask one of the top 6 teams, who would you rather not play in that mix? I mean, they could tell you Texas game to game or BYU. Miami would be in that mix though, right? Like because when Miami is running well, they play great. The problem
Yeah.
is like you're losing double digit favorites again. And it was the games you lost. The head to head, let's at least focus in on this. We're looking at it now. Miami beat Notre Dame. The metrics are pretty comparable, other than Miami's losses, right? Which are clearly separate. Like
Yes.
that's the defining thing. Do you have a problem with it?
Do I have a problem with?
With Notre Dame being ranked above Miami?
Yes, because okay, let me just say this. Yes, because of the criteria that we're supposed to be using for this.
I
I
agree.
don't have an issue with it in general, but I have an issue with it because of the criteria that we're using. So that's sort of where I'm at is what the committee is using to get these teams in, and that's what I'm arguing more so than
Just
this
your
being
opinion. I
fair.
agree.
Yes, exactly. It's like this is the part where this needs to be fixed. And I think the other part of this is I do think if Alabama loses and BYU loses, I do think there's potential that the committee puts Miami at the 10 spot, which would get them into the college football playoff, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we'll just get like all the ACC teams in.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
2 ACC
Yeah.
teams. Woo!
No,
That's what we want. That will make college football better.
I agree with you though, because if things are close, use head to head. Like to me, you're absolutely right. Like there, it's close enough. They played each other. I know it was a while ago, and again, I'm gonna die on this hill. When you lose is the most important factor for this.
No, it's true.
Look at A&M. If they would have lost to Texas in week 4, and I'm glad we play it the last week of the season, by the way. Keep doing that. they would have been ranked higher, like spots higher, like considerably. Like that's how this is, and I don't like it.
Yeah. We're gonna have to change the college football playoff. But any parting thoughts on this last rankings before we get the actual rankings?
Um, it is nice to see some group of five teams getting some love. And if you're the fans of these group of five teams kind of mourning the loss, your coach is going to another school.
Yeah.
I think these programs have life. It could really provide a shakeup for that first weekend. Now, are the games going to be competitive? I don't know. I like that these teams have access, and yet I think it can be painful for the bubble teams kind of having to endure this format, which is clearly flawed. Like second year doing this, you could feel the flaws in there, and change is coming. It's going to expand. We know that's going to happen. Um, but as is, Paige, I think things are relatively cut and dry with the
Yep.
opportunity for Duke to be a throw a wrench in things considerably.
Yeah. So really all eyes on Duke this weekend. But we hope you enjoy the games. Kramer and I will be in studio for the final show on Sunday. So we will be together and bring you those. Come back in the chat and we'll see actually what happens. It'll be very exciting to talk about those games that did happen. And we have the final rankings this Sunday. We appreciate you hanging out, being lively in the chat. This has been the College Football Ranking Show presented by Modelo.